Something I've always found interesting about Dreamworks animation is that when their movies fail, they fail in a very interesting manner. And by interesting, I mean they decide to choose the most bizarre story concept imaginable. A young, imaginative boy has to deal with his new baby brother, who is a top businessman working for a baby corporation. A bee decides to sue the human race while romancing a human woman. And of course, a mafia movie for children, starring fish. Shark Tale, I think, is possibly DreamWorks Animation's least popular movie, and for good reason. While initially derided as a rip-off of Finding Nemo simply because of the underwater premise, I'll say now that aside from its location, this is a very different movie to the Pixar classic, for two main reasons. Number one, it sucks, and number two, while Finding Nemo is a charming tale of a widowed father searching for his kidnapped son, Shark Tale, as I've said, is a mafia movie starring fish. But while that premise speaks for itself, let's go into full detail. What went wrong with Shark Tale? The movie opens with Lenny, a nervous shark who wants to be a vegetarian despite the wishes of his mafia don father. Lenny seems like a pretty nice guy, with a relatable problem that kids will understand. But, for some reason, he's not the main protagonist. Instead, we have Oscar, a disturbingly human-looking fish who works at a whale-watching facility but wants nothing more than to be famous. The best way to describe Oscar is, well, have you ever met one of those people who is incredibly awkward and annoying, but is convinced that they're really funny and one of the cool crowd? Well, imagine that, but also make him incredibly selfish and superficial. He is a thoroughly unlikable protagonist. Oscar's home is a reef that lives in fear of the shark mafia, and he owes money to his boss, a pufferfish named Sykes, who needs to pay the don. Sykes threatens to kill Oscar unless he pays up, because this is totally a family-friendly movie, so Oscar seeks help from his friend and secret admirer, Angie. I have absolutely no idea why Angie is in love with Oscar, given how much of a jerk he is, but nevertheless, she gives him an old family pearl to sell and cover his debts. And how does Oscar repay this kindness? By betting it on a seahorse race and losing. So Sykes has his Jamaican stereotype henchman get rid of Oscar, and they do so by offering him up to a shark. Said shark, however, is Lenny, who's trying to convince his brother Frankie that he can eat fish. Lenny tries to free Oscar, but Frankie sees, attempts to hunt and eat him, but is killed by a falling anchor. Lenny attempts to save him, tossing away the anchor, but fails and flees, leaving Oscar standing in front of a shark corpse, leading to him being mistaken for a shark slayer. Oscar takes advantage of his newfound fame, moving to a new apartment in the richest part of the reef and leaving behind his best friend Angie while getting together with a gold digger named Lola. Because he needs to pretend to be a shark slayer while keeping the shark mafia off of his back, and Lenny needs to get away from his fish-eating family, the two of them decide to team up and fake a fight. While this works, Oscar soon realizes that fame is overrated, and that the shark mafia won't be giving up all that easily. So, this film has a lot of problems. First things first, this is supposed to be a film for kids, right? Look, I am all for having dark or more adult themes in kids' cartoons, much like how Finding Nemo deals with the death of a loved one and just how this can affect a person. But there are certain subjects that kids just flat out are not going to understand or appreciate, and owing debts to the mafia is one of them. Why is this such a huge part of a children's movie? Like, I get putting in some references to appeal to the adults, but this entire plot is basically a person getting in trouble with the mafia for seemingly killing the Don's son. That's not an over-exaggeration, that's literally the plot. I mean, the idea of a vegetarian shark and a son not living up to parents' expectations, well, kids will get that. But having to pay off a debt to your boss who owes the mafia, not so much. And the second problem with the movie? Oscar. He is such an unlikable protagonist. There's a moment where, halfway through the film, Angie confesses her feelings for him, but chastises him and acts like he's changed, and we get a sad montage where Oscar realises how his fame and fortune is superficial and isn't who he should be. Except, he literally hasn't changed at all since becoming rich. He's just as arrogant, just as stupid, and just as selfish as he was when he was poor. It's not like he was originally a sweet guy who becomes shallow once he gets rich and famous. He was still selfish enough to bet his friend's life-saving gift on a horse race, and he was still shallow and ignorant enough to fall for a girl who flat out tells him she's a superficial gold digger. Angie getting mad at him flat out makes no sense, given he is no different to how he was beforehand. And why on earth did she like him back then anyway? He's so obnoxious. But he's not exactly alone in that regard, because this entire movie is obnoxious. There's such an overabundance of product placement, obvious references, out-of-place music, and thoroughly unfunny jokes. It's trying far too hard to seem cool. It's a very aggravating contrast where the story is far too adult, but the tone and humour are far too juvenile. As a result, adults will find the movie too annoying to enjoy, and the only kids young enough to appreciate such a tone will not be old enough to understand or appreciate a goddamn mafia movie plot. Again, I don't think the film was necessarily a rip-off of Finding Nemo, but it was released around the same time, thus comparisons are inevitable. And good God, the comparisons really do say a lot. I mean, I could go into just how much more emotionally powerful Finding Nemo is, or how much more interesting and likeable the characters are, but I feel that's a bit too obvious. There are other subtle details that also show just why it's a better movie in every way. Take the world it crafts, for example. In Finding Nemo, every fish is literally just a cartoonish version of a real-life species, as opposed to the absolutely hideous designs of Shark Tale's cast, who are basically fish with human teeth and faces. On top of that, Finding Nemo takes place in a natural underwater environment that takes advantage of the beauty of coral reefs, whereas Shark Tale takes place in an incredibly lazily designed world that just takes a human city made of metal and wiring and sticks it underwater. Why even set it underwater if you're just going to make it like a regular city? The shark mafia living in a luxury sunken ship is at least a neat idea, but that's about it. It doesn't make up for the rest. Furthermore, the main message of Finding Nemo about the perils of overprotective parenting, while very clear, is at least delivered in a natural and mature fashion.
No, you can't! You think you can do these things, but you can't, Nemo!
The messages of Shark Tale, those being the very basic lying is wrong and fame and fortune are overrated, are just being consistently shoved in the audience's face. The whole lying is wrong message obviously leads to the old liar reveal trope that everyone hates, while the fame and fortune are overrated message is completely botched. Like I said earlier, fame doesn't exactly go to Oscar's head or turn him shallow. He's just as horrible when he's poor, and despite him acting like he didn't know what he had until he lost it, well, it's not like being famous and wealthy was standing in his way of that. He could still date Angie while rich and famous. He could still move back to his old home and to the whale wash while rich and famous. Again, it's not the fame or fortune standing in the way of that. It's the fact that he is, and always has been, a total jerkass. So, if that's what went wrong, how would I put it right? Simply put, make the story about Lenny. Lenny is a far more likeable protagonist than Oscar, and his motivations are a lot more understandable and sympathetic. Most folks can empathise with a person who isn't living up to parental expectations, and his flaws of nervousness and awkwardness are a lot more endearing than Oscar's selfishness. How about, instead of having the story be about a fish who pretends to be a shark slayer, have it be about a shark that decides to start defending fish instead of eating them? In the original movie, Lenny disguises himself as a dolphin after leaving his family. I'd say have it be the same here. Have him be cast out of his family because he won't eat fish, then have him move to the depths of the reef, hiding while homeless. But then he decides to pretend to be a dolphin so he can work with the fish. And when one of his family members tries to attack the reef, have him fight them off. Let his journey be about gaining confidence through his new superhero persona that he has to put on while disguising himself from his family and new friends. Then, when he finally reveals his true self, it's by properly standing up to his family, and that way we can avert the liar reveal trope by showing that yes, he was a shark all along, but he's still on the side of the fish, so they can still accept and support him, as he proves that sharks can live peacefully with other fish. Oh, and obviously, just completely remove Oscar. Is there a lesson to be learned from Shark Tale? Well, aside from don't make mafia movies for kids, the obvious one would be just how much an unlikable protagonist can ruin a story. While Shark Tale isn't the worst animated movie I've ever reviewed, I'll argue that Oscar is the worst animated protagonist I've ever had to deal with. While Gene the Emoji is just painfully bland, and Norma the North is just incredibly ignorant, at the very least they had good intentions. Oscar, on the other hand, only cares about himself, and as a result, it's just difficult to root for him. And when you have no horse in the race, it's pretty hard to appreciate it. And that, my friends, is precisely what went wrong. Thanks for watching the video. Have you seen this movie? Do you think it's the worst Dreamworks animated movie? And if not, which would you say is worse? Would you like to see a review of it? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down below. Like, share and subscribe and all that jazz. And I hope to speak to you again soon. Goodbye!